Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Patricia Kong. I'm with Scrum.org. We are really excited. I say that for everyone, but I'm actually deeply excited in this one because I'm doing a lot of research and development around facilitation right now. But today's webinar that we have for you is 10 tips to facilitate effective sprint reviews. And I find that really interesting because I think there's a lot of information that is available to the public around sprint retrospectives and facilitating those. But in terms of engagement at a sprint review, I don't think there's a lot or enough information that is shared about that. And Ravi Verma is an excellent person to drive that conversation for us. We have two other PSTs who are also with us today, Nagesh Sharma and Tony Lee. It's kind of late for you both. You're in Asia Pacific, but they're here because we received a lot of questions, and they're passionate about the topic in terms of facilitation and how we create engagement and manage those facilitation principles and techniques when we're talking about Scrum and teamwork. So today there's going to be a template that Ravi is going to share, and we're going to go through different things. So as always, for quick guidelines, you're all going to be muted, but there is a Q&A box for you to submit your questions. I'll be looking at those and watching them and seeing how we can get those answered while also sharing the 10 steps. This session is recorded. My colleague will have this up on our website within the next day for everyone to rewatch and get all those 10 tips again. So again, question and answer box that's ready for you. And what else? Who is Scrum.org? That's us. So Scrum.org is this consistent global community. We have probably over 350 professional Scrum trainers who are a community that is working with the larger global community, all of you who are attending, to pursue that ongoing learning. And we do that with obviously the training, the education, and experiences like this. So today, moving quickly, we have the presenters. You can see their little faces on the side Zoom boxes. But again, they're here because this is a really interesting topic that I think we're going to have a lot of stories to share, some challenges, our different scars, and we'll make sure that everybody gets a chance to speak. So I'll just hand it over to Nagesh because I see your face first, and do a little introduction of yourself.
Thank you, Patricia. So my name is Nagesh Sharma, and I am from India. And I'm very proud to be part of the professional Scrum Trainer community. And my mission drives me in increasing the joy and accomplishment people feel with agile ways of working. Thank you so much. I'm really humbled to be here. Over to you, Tony.
Hi everyone, and thank you for the opportunity today for me to join the group. My name is Tony Lee. I'm a PhD in Taiwan, and I'm also very passionate in Scrum, in the agile working, the practice, how to empower others. So thank you again for the opportunity. Pass on to you, Ravi.
All right, my name is Ravi Varma. I am originally from India, currently in Dallas, Texas. And my mission is to help companies build inspiring leaders who unleash awesome teams across the organization. And no better way in my mind than Scrum to do that. And that's why we are here. All right, let me set some expectations. So what we are going to cover is we will give you a structure for a sprint review that we've been using and refining with our clients for over 5 years. So this is not something we cooked up in a laboratory. We've been using it, and we have seen that this has transformed the level of conversations in sprint reviews in pursuit of the outcome of a sprint review, which is course correction, crowdsourcing learning in pursuit of course corrections. So we will offer a slide deck template that you can consider, which will have 10 broad topics. And these 10 broad topics are the 10 tips for sprint reviews. Along the way, we will sprinkle our preferred facilitation techniques. Feel free to rip out our facilitation techniques and replace them with your own. When appropriate, we will tie back to facilitation principles and values. Trish is the expert in that area, so I'm requesting her to please chime in. And we'll drop on a real world experience. So like I said, we've been using this specific template for 5+ years, and Nagesh, Tony, and we've been helping companies with Scrum for anywhere between 5 to 15+ years. And we'll stay true to the sprint review section of the Scrum Guide. We went through about, I don't know, there were probably 200, 300 questions that came in from registrants. Thank you so much. And some questions were, I'm here to learn about the basics of Scrum. Sorry, wrong place. I'm not going to talk about Scrum fundamentals. The link will tell you in the PDF, which is available later on, will tell you where to learn about fundamentals of Scrum. Some questions on scaling sprint reviews in multi-product, multi-team context. That's not what we're doing here. And some questions were about industry. How can I do a sprint review in a pharmaceutical industry? This is not the place for that question to be answered. You can post that on the community forum. There's some caveats. The sprint review is not a presentation. It's really about a conversation so that we can crowdsource wisdom, collaborate, and figure out where to go next. I'm just illustrating how to facilitate the conversation using slides. Don't get fixated on the tool I'm using. Stay focused on the outcome. So use whatever tool, including no tool, that makes sense in your context. Just stay true to the Scrum values. Facilitate in a way that's true to the Scrum values and helps us achieve the outcomes of sprint review as laid out in the Scrum Guide. Managing your expectations. There are probably 1,000 people by now on this webinar. They'll have different questions. We cannot answer every single question from 1,000 people in a free 60-minute webinar. Here's what we can do. Most of the ideas that I'm introducing in this webinar are stolen from a Scrum.org training course. So where applicable, I will connect the technique or the idea to a Scrum.org workshop. So you want to learn more, your question was not answered in the webinar, I would recommend go to that workshop, spend 2 or 3 days with a Scrum.org trainer, get all your questions answered. You'll have our contact information. You want help from one of the 3 of us, contact us. And then if you don't have the budget for training or consulting, coaching, that's okay. We'll give you some free resources where applicable. Okay, so here's the slide deck we've been using. So here's the title slide. Here are the 10 topics. So if you look on the top, there's a subway map that will tell your sprint review attendees what are the 10 stations that we are going to pause at, that we're going to visit, and where are we relative to those 10 stations. And these are the 10 topics that were promised in the title of the webinar. That's why you're here. So a lot of times stakeholders have not attended any Scrum training, nor perhaps should they, or nor will they. So they show up to this meeting, they have no clue what's about to happen, and they will bring their expectations about what's likely to happen. This is your opportunity to set the stage, to avoid misaligned, mismatched expectations. Introduce the team, humanize the team. Many times people don't even know the human beings working behind the scenes. Introduce them to the different people, and also tell them what role are they playing in this game that we are playing called Scrum, and specifically in the sprint review. What is expected from the stakeholders? Nagesh, you had a great point here where you set expectations with your stakeholders. What would you like to add?
Absolutely, Ravi. So one of the things which has been very helpful for me in effective sprint retrospective facilitations is setting the expectations with the stakeholders in advance. So to give an example, what I have found very helpful is product owner already setting expectation with what are the different kinds of stakeholder personas. So imagine you have a compliance manager or a legal person representing legal department in the sprint review. So specifically, what kind of feedback is expected? What kind of product backlog items are we having conformance? Do we have any non-conformity? Similarly, you may be having somebody representing product marketing. So what is exactly expected of them? So perhaps something like, are we aligned to our branding guide? How about our outbound messaging? So in that way, it is very helpful because as Ravi said, we all have our role to play during sprint review.
Thank you, Nagesh. There were some questions around who facilitates it, what's the role of a Scrum Master. Here's what I recommend to my clients, and I've seen this work well. I recommend that every sprint review should be facilitated by a different member of the Scrum team. And ideally, in every sprint review, try to get as many of the members of the Scrum team to speak up. And let me explain the why. I tie it back to the principle of self-management. I find that if the product owner is the person who's constantly presenting The developers are not as engaged, which was also one of your questions in the webinar registration. How do I get my developers to get engaged? So I recommend make sure that the responsibility of facilitating the sprint review is rotated and every single developer gets a chance to participate in this presentation of the facilitation. Okay, so explain to your stakeholders who are the players and what is their accountability in the game of Scrum and what is expected of the stakeholders. Also, many of you said people just show up and they think it's a status report to a steering committee or it's just a demo. Tell them this is not a status report, although there will be a demo. The demo is not the intent. It's a means to an end. And although we are presenting some information, that is not the intent. It is a bi-directional collaborative conversation. So tell them we are here to share the work we've done. Then we're going to crowdsource your wisdom. We're going to learn from you. And then after this meeting is over, we are going to figure out how do we synthesize your wisdom and course correct. Because each one of you knows something that nobody else does. Design your alliance. This is something that I learned in coactive coaching. Create a working agreement that will guide the way we behave with each other during this sprint review so that we maximize value for the company. And this is an idea I shared, I stole from a Scrum.org workshop. In Scrum.org workshops, many times we use a technique called try, favor, avoid. So I stole that idea. There are these on the left are some unhelpful patterns of behavior that we have seen that prevent us from getting value from sprint reviews. And I suggested some alternate ways of being in a sprint review, which might get better value. Pause and ask your stakeholders, how do you feel about this? What adjustments do we need to make so that we can create a space that works for you and works for us and works for our company? Design your alliance. Humanize your sprint goal. Some people ask questions, how do we do a sprint review for infrastructure? This is something we talk about in Scrum.org workshops. Every sprint must be in pursuit of solving a problem, a complex problem, or at least a thin vertical slice of a complex problem, ideally in service of a human being. Software or whatever technology you're working on, whatever space you might be in, we exist to serve human beings, make their lives better. Tell stakeholders which human beings will have a better life as a result of achieving the sprint goal. Otherwise, the stakeholders are bored, they're on their cell phones, they're disengaged. Tell them, where are these human beings right now? Where do they want to be? What are the barriers that are stopping them from achieving their desired goals? And how will the sprint goal build a bridge from their current state to the target state? Trish?
Yeah, so there's a couple things that I think are really powerful here as we go through this notion of goals. And one of the things that I was thinking about that I hear often is, people aren't engaging in the sprint review. And so this notion that we're bringing it back to the why, what is the purpose, how are we empathizing with our users is really important. But what do you suggest, Ravi? And we've had little conversations about this, and even Nagesh and Tony, but who do you think should attend the sprint review? Like how do we consider even this notion of different stakeholders that they may or may not care about this product goal or sprint goal? Hopefully they do, but sometimes there's just managers who are coming in and looking to listen, and so they lose that engagement because they just want to see what's been done, and there's that mindset that you're trying to switch them out of. Do you have any things there?
Yeah, I'd love to hear from maybe Tony and then Nagesh if you have to share anything. And if I have anything valuable to add, I'll add after them.
I want to share, thank you, Trish, for the great question. One thing I have observed in the past is that in the sprint review, it's almost like there's an alliance, people have a shared interest. And if there's people out there are not having the shared interest, sometimes the question comes up is why are they not having the shared interest? Are they the right people for the key stakeholders for the sprint review that can bring up the insightful insights that the team needs? Because I see it's both investments from the Scrum team and the key stakeholders, right? Scrum team needs that feedback to continually adapt. and the stakeholders, like they have a stake in the game. They supposed to care, supposed to help them. Like, Nagesh, do you have anything to add on?
Sure. So this is interesting. Who are the right people? Actually, the Scrum team knows who are the right people. Do they know it right the first time? In my experience, yes and no. So what I have seen is it is a hypothesis. Everything is a hypothesis. What we are building product is also a hypothesis. Similarly, who are the right stakeholders is a hypothesis. And the only way for the Scrum team to know are these people the right people is to invite them in the sprint review and see if they are able to get benefited as well as they are able to add value to the sprint review. And what I would say is, since you've been part of the sprint review, you should not continue if you are not getting value and the Scrum team is not getting value. I would always say you should inspect and adapt through transparency. So as long as you are impacted by the increment, you are a stakeholder. So I would just say take the path of empiricism.
Yeah.
Ravi, do you have anything to add before I add several of the questions that have come up now?
Yeah, so we've had a whole spectrum. We've had clients where nobody shows up for the sprint review. It's meaningless because the product owner, if the Scrum team is talking to itself, it's a waste of time. And we've had sprint reviews where 50% of the company shows up. So now, in one case, nobody's showing up. In other case, half the company is showing up, and management was worried. They figured out the hourly cost to the company of a participant, and they said, wow, this is like a $20,000 meeting. What am I getting in return? And this is where I would tie back to what Nagesh was saying. If you're going to show up, don't just be a fly on the wall, add value. Either you get value, but help your company with your wisdom maximize the value of the work done by the team in pursuit of the product goal. And then part of the designed alliance could be, look, we are inviting you to the sprint review because we truly believe that you have some unique wisdom that nobody else has, and you can help us maximize value of the work done by the team in pursuit of the product goal. However, should we discover through empiricism that that's not happening, how would you like to handle it? Because we want to be good stewards of the company's time and money. How would you like to handle it? And then co-create the alliance. That's what I would recommend.
So one of the things that might frame this for people who are watching and listening is that the core principle of facilitation is about participation so that we can reach an objective and an outcome. And so the things that I'm hearing from Tony, Nagesh, and Ravi is help to set those expectations. So do you have to be so blunt? This is what's expected when you're at the sprint review. This is what we're trying to learn, and this is how we're going to be able to think about future adaptations for our product. This is what's expected, and this is how it can be helpful for the sprint review. So that's something really to think about when you think about a core principle of facilitation, is that participation, people are heard, their opinions are there, but it's to meet some objective. The interesting part that's come in for you three is how do you know, and maybe this is more about the sprint review, but how do you know who to invite, and how do you deal with sometimes how do you facilitate maybe some of the ego problems and the politic problems that might come up during a sprint review, because we're talking about a lot of business impact in this meeting event.
I would do what Nagesh said. If we lean on the principle of self-management, let's start by asking the Scrum team, who do you think might help us achieve the intent of the sprint review? And no matter what you do, you're going to be wrong. That's a guarantee. There will be some people who did not add value, and there will be some people who get upset because they could have added value and they were not there. And so I would say start there. One of our clients where half the company joined, then people start forwarding it. And I would say design the alliance upfront to say, look, it's possible that we will adjust the attendee list. And here's what we need from you. Stay true to the product goal, stay true to the company purpose, and please give us permission. And maybe we hurt your feelings. If we do, let's stop, let's figure it out. So I think the best place to start is ask the team. That's what Ken Schwaber says, right? Ask the team. Start by asking the team, realize no matter what you do, you're going to be wrong. That's why empiricism is there. Lean on empiricism and then inspect and adapt. Okay, anything else before we move on?
Oh, I mean, there's a lot.
Before we move on.
Before we move on, I think these questions are appropriate here. Is that in your diagram you have personas, and maybe just a little bit clarification about when you're talking about your goal on the sprint review. Who are those? Who is that persona? Is that persona about the person who's attending the sprint review, or is that persona about who the work was created for? And again, yes. I think we've already talked about how do you identify who the personas are? Who do you want that feedback from for the sprint review? Let's ask the team whose input would be really valuable here. And I think that might be a little clarification just on that little picture up there.
Yes, this persona is not people attending the sprint review, although it might be. The persona is who are the human beings whose life we are trying to improve through the accomplishment of the sprint goal. Okay,
thank you.
All right.
Just one last question, because I think this is important. You had talked about getting the right people in the room, and if those people aren't in there, what is the point? Would you suggest canceling the sprint review at that point? You can see the PSTs like, whoa, this is very interesting.
Yeah, I wouldn't cancel the sprint review. So let's imagine we invited who we thought were the right people, and we show up, and none of them show up. I would say that's a great opportunity to then take it to your retrospective. Or ideally, if you have the cell phone numbers of the people, start making calls. Why are you not here? Don't give up just yet. And if nobody shows up, do the best you can, but then learn. There's a strong signal being given to you by the organization. They are voting with their feet by not showing up. That's a great opportunity for your retrospective. What's going on?
Actually, I've tried one of the techniques, and I see recording the sprint review, and exactly this is what we have done as well in the past. And making sure that everybody on the call in the sprint review or in person, everybody agrees that they don't have any problem. Then we make sure that whoever is the stakeholders, relevant stakeholders, we make it available with them, and we create more like an invitation-based changed approach. That means that how can we create that curiosity and value for the stakeholders? If stakeholders are not coming, they are perhaps not seeing the value. How can we make sure that they start seeing value? And as Ravi said, your sprint retrospectives are the levers in order to really uncover those opportunities.
Yeah, Tony.
I just want to add on. I feel like the coming back to the purpose of a sprint review is to inspect what happened and figure out what can we do next for Scrum team and for a key stakeholder. In the past, I have came across a case working in a small size company. The key stakeholder is the CEO, and he doesn't know how to provide feedback. It was the team wasn't aware of how to set up the screen review, the facilitation to elicit feedback. So the CEO didn't feel the need. Why do I need to be there? So that's something I saw that to really educate the stakeholder is for the benefit of their own. The second is interesting. The Scrum team, I also work with Scrum teams that there's no one showed up, and they start turning into the missed opportunity in the following sprint retrospective to find out why, and they perhaps didn't share the information, they engage while they're working with the key stakeholder. So key stakeholder did not really was not engaged or feel interest to participate. As soon as they start showing the work done throughout the sprint and the key stakeholder realize it's not what they want, I said that's actually a change of the behavior. They actually want to be there to give their feedback because they don't want to go deviate any further.
Yeah. All right. I'm noticing we are 24 minutes into the webinar, and I am on the third topic of the 10 topics. I'm going to speed things up. All right. So we deliver what we promised to you. Okay. So we humanized the goal, and hopefully we tied it back to the stakeholders and tied it to hopefully the stakeholders care about these human beings, customers and users. And if we can build a bridge between what the stakeholder cares about and what the Scrum team cares about and what the sprint was all about, maybe there is a greater chance that the stakeholder will pay attention and give constructive feedback. Explain how the sprint goal ties to the product goal and the company goal. Again, one reason why stakeholders don't show up is they are not able to build a bridge between the work done by the team and what they care about. See if you can build the bridge here. Tied back to the product strategy, this is my preferred framework. It's a very simple framework. You have some strategic pillars. And then one of my clients actually color codes and highlights the pillar that is being implemented through the delivery or the achievement of the sprint goal. Tied back to your business model, this is a canvas that we use. We use a technique called canvases in the PSPO workshop. And this is my preferred canvas, Roman Pickler's canvas. Make sure that every single sprint is tied back as a technique or a tactic to implement your strategy or your business model. Make sure that you are transparent about the quality. So everything that is being reviewed in a sprint review should meet your definition of done. Be transparent, shut the back door in case people are taking shortcuts on quality. Tell them, summarize what's about to be reviewed. Tell them what key improvements you made, either in terms of capabilities or defects, and then go into the demo. Have members of the Scrum team, ideally the developers, show the accomplishments of the sprint, the product capabilities that were added. And now this is where you start to get constructive feedback and you avoid crickets. This is a technique called perfection game from Code Protocols. I learned that from an amazing PST, Ralph Jochum. He did a webinar on this topic, which is available as a clickable link on the slides. So ask them this question. On a scale of 0 to 10, to what extent did we maximize value? And the perfection game says for every point below 10, I mean, you've got to, if let's imagine a stakeholder who's always critical says, this is horrible, I'll give you a 0 out of 10. Fantastic. How can we improve so that next time we get a 10 out of 10? So you avoid a situation where they are like a seagull, right? The seagull flies over the ship, craps all over, and then flies off. We don't want the seagull school of feedback. We want constructive feedback. If you think this is crap, fine. Tell us how can we make it better. Talk about quality. Tell them what improvements you made on quality. Ask them similar feedback, or if you want, you can use a liberating structure. Tell them, how can we improve quality? How did we do? Again, we are trying to avoid silence where people just criticize. Trish.
Yeah, what do you do in this situation when, and this is a sprint review conversation maybe, but when you're trying to capture information on quality, but you don't have a finished increment to present?
Yeah, so there's nothing to share. I would say be transparent. In fact, I learned this from a former PhD, Pradeepa Narayan Swami, and she said, the most important time to have a sprint review is when you have nothing to share. Be transparent about the challenges you faced and why you have nothing to share, and be humble and curious and ask the stakeholders, how can we get better? It's not an opportunity for self-flagellation or beating anybody up. It's an opportunity for crowdsourcing wisdom in pursuit of getting better, so this doesn't happen again. That's what I would recommend.
That's really important. Thank you.
All right. What challenges did we encounter? I think this represents, this is the Scrum value of openness in action. Be open and transparent about the good, bad, the ugly. The truth may piss you off, but it'll set you free. So be transparent. Look, here's all the crap that we had to deal with. Sometimes stakeholders have no clue how challenging it is to create a valuable increment in a short period of time. Let them know what challenges you are facing, how you overcame them. Ask them, what other challenges did you notice that that might not be here? Have them appreciate what it takes to build a high quality, valuable increment. A lot of companies bring Scrum into their company. So usually what happens is companies bring Scrum into their company because they just want the developers to be faster, better, cheaper. I want to maximize velocity. They don't realize they are bringing like a 1,000-watt flashlight, which will expose the impediments, systemic dysfunctions that are preventing maximization of value. And if you don't highlight the impediment, systemic barriers, then sprint review just becomes an opportunity for them to beat up on the developers. It's got to be two-way accountability. Sprint review will reveal good, bad, ugly, things the developers, the Scrum team can do better, things the rest of the stakeholders can do better. And this is your opportunity to hold your stakeholders accountable and to hold yourself accountable. One of the most important things here is have your impediments and the age. Many times executives would rather not face the truth in terms of the impediments that the Scrum team has no power to remove. Only executives have power to remove, but they have allowed that impediment to languish for months. And if you don't put the age there, it's very hard to hold the executives accountable because they are not honoring their part of the bargain. Talk about what's changed in the environment. I really like the Scrum.org framework of evidence-based management, which allows you, which gives you a framework to take a holistic view of the state of your business and emerging trends in the market. Figure out what's changed in your ecosystem, and then what adjustments can you make within your sphere of control to respond to the changes that you cannot control. One of the things I remember from Ken's PSM training was, Ken told us, you cannot control the world. All you can do is understand what is your sphere of influence and control and create a cadence where you can respond to the uncontrollable, unpredictable changes in the world. And this topic in your sprint review may help you realize how is the world changing and how might you respond in the face of those unpredictable, uncontrollable changes. How are we making progress towards our product goal? You could share a forecast. We offer you some forecasting frameworks or approaches in PSPO and PSPO Advanced. This is just one of my preferred approaches. You could have a rolling 12-month roadmap. If you want, you can have like a 3-month plan. Use a technique, but stakeholders are probably curious. What can I expect? And again, it's not a guarantee. It's not a prediction. It's a forecast. Ask them. Similar perfection game if you want. Use a liberating structure. Get their feedback. How can we improve progress towards our product goal? Trish.
Ravi, and I was thinking about the forecasting and the environment might be a good time to explore techniques that you use when you're trying to align stakeholders from different time zones. And I know you've done that with, client that has people in lots of different continents. How do you manage those types of sprint reviews in different time zones?
So we usually, when Nagesh and I did this for a company, it was a multi-billion-dollar publicly traded company. We felt that the most important attendees were the C-suite. So we used to go to the C-suite and we used to ask them, what is a 90-minute window that you can give to us every 2 weeks, which will conflict the least with all your road shows, talking to investors and so on. And then we put some guardrails. We said, we've got people all the way from India to, let's say, the West Coast. Can you give us a 90-minute window that causes minimal conflict in the schedule of the C-suite, plus will cause the least discomfort across the time horizon of our team? They gave us like 9 o'clock Central, or I think it was 9 or 10 o'clock Central Thursdays. And then that's what we did. And now we realized that was inconvenient for some time zones, but we tried to do that. The second pattern that we did was in another company, we rotated the pane. So maybe there were certain times where it worked for, let's say, Poland, but it was uncomfortable for India and Dallas. And then maybe sometimes it was convenient for Dallas. And then sometimes it was convenient for India, because the message it sent was, we value and respect everybody's time with their family. And just because the funding is coming from Dallas, it doesn't mean that the sprint review will always be at a time that is convenient for Dallas, but it's inconvenient to everyone else. Everyone is equal. So those are a couple of techniques that I have used, which try to honor the Scrum values and just being a good human being. All right. Anything else? Okay, very good. I feel that the essence of Scrum is to use the cadence of a sprint to discover things that we don't know. And very often this is lost. We have an uncontrollable, unpredictable world. And you don't know how the work that you do is going to be is going to impact or going to be received by the market. So I think Kurt Bittner says every product backlog item is an unproven hypothesis, is suspect until proven otherwise by the market. And Gunther says there's only one and only one source of truth, which is the market. So no matter how smart you think, if you're in the complex domain, chances are you're going to be wrong more often than you're going to be right. That's why you're using Scrum. The goal is, how can I fail fast? How can we learn fast? How can we course correct fast? And if you don't focus on the learning from every sprint, Scrum may not be the right framework for you. Celebrate learning. What do we now know about our market that we did not know at the start of the sprint? Celebrate that. That is success. Success is not on time, on scope, on budget. Success is learning every sprint. Celebrate your role models. This is where you reward the culture, you nurture the culture. Culture is very delicate, very fragile. People will notice who is being applauded. Don't applaud firefighters. I heard a quote: if you reward firefighters, you are breeding arsonists. Reward people who are modeling the Scrum values and self-management and empiricism. Give people an opportunity to connect with you outside of the sprint review. So one of my clients has created a Microsoft Teams channel for stakeholder interaction. And they tell people, look, guys, I know you're bursting with ideas. There's so much you want to share with us. Half the company is on this call. We can't have all the conversations you want to have in this call. However, we do have this Microsoft Teams channel. Go post your messages there. Let's continue the conversation. And this is where perhaps you can use the liberating structure and say, okay, let's collaborate. We introduce certain dimensions of the product during this conversation. What calls you? Where do you want to help us get better? Does quality call you? Impediments, risk, forecasting, something else? We're going to open up some breakout rooms, self-select, go to the breakout room that calls you. Be prepared to come back with some suggestions, at least one 15% solution. What is it that you can do within your sphere of influence and control to maximize value from the work done by the team between now and the next sprint review? Okay. And that's it. That brings us to the end. Questions. Still have 20 minutes.
That was a lot of tips and a lot of time. What I'm going to drop right now into the chat channel for all is some development that we've been doing around facilitation. And so the principles of facilitation and how you might think about them in the Scrum setting. And the reason that I'm putting that in there is because Ravi, he just showed these different techniques like liberating structures. Those are a set of techniques. What you'll find in that page is that there's a space now we're still developing more, is about what facilitation techniques might be helpful for you during whatever Scrum event or something like that. Like if you're trying to build consensus, why is Fist of Five something that might be helpful? How would you use something like White Elephant? How could you use that instead of planning poker? Those types of things to get that collaboration going. And it's really segmented into the purpose that we're trying to achieve. So I have several questions. If we'd like to just maybe open this up as a panel style, does that seem all right with Tony and Nagesh? Okay. So thank you, Ravi. That was a lot of information, and those stories were helpful, and the template is really helpful. There's some more in there. To the people who are attending, if you don't, get an answer to your question, please contact these gentlemen on LinkedIn, and I'm sure that they will respond to you. And if we don't get to your question and we have it here, we'll find a way to respond to you. One of the first questions, and this kind of ties into some of the things around the notion of a demo, but do you have suggestions on how to conduct a sprint review when you have an API only team? And so what happens is that I assume what's happening is that this team is not finding a lot of engagement because they're showing the API, a small part of, let's say, a larger product. What are your suggestions there? Maybe Nagesh.
It's interesting, Trish. So I would say that irrespective of what kind of nature of the product is, so for example, like something very similar to API is also like infrastructure. I have nothing much to demonstrate in terms of what is being built as a part of infrastructure. So what I would say is the purpose of the sprint review is to inspect the increment and adapt the product backlog through the feedback which is coming from the stakeholders. So I think so that what we are building on assumptions, we have a much more validation for that. So I would always say that irrespective of what kind of product we are building, value lies in validating the most riskiest assumptions we have been making throughout the sprint. And that's only through the means of feedback. So I would say that take step-by-step approach. Even if you can show a small piece of a big puzzle, I think still it's worth taking the feedback because you might be solving a wrong puzzle, right?
I want to add, Trish, I was the agile coach for a large telecom company which was making APIs so that resellers could white label their services. So I have real world experience with an API only. Actually, it was kind of like a nexus, maybe 300 people working on just APIs. And I had an amazing product owner, and he would start the sprint review with a story. Imagine you are a reseller for cell phone, internet, landline, and you go to a client site with your iPad. And the client says, so how much will it cost for me to get internet, cell phone, landline for all my 5 Subway local restaurants? Imagine you pull up your iPad. It's like it's like a commercial that we may have seen. And you enter the zip code of the locations of those subways, and boom, behind the scenes, there's an API call, and it tells the client whether the service is available or not available and what's the cost. So you're humanizing it. Every API, every infrastructure change, it should be in pursuit of making life better for a human being. If you're not able to tell the story in terms of a human being, that is a coaching opportunity. Look at it as a coaching opportunity.
The skill that you're expressing that I hear that we often talk about, especially with evidence-based management, is the story. So this notion of storytelling for engagement, we're trainers, we're coaches, consultants, and all right. So that is really something that we practice and to truly actively listen and also express stories. So that's something that I'm hearing from you. So Ravi, you brought up Nexus. So here it is. How does a sprint review look like in a scaled environment? So Nexus is when you have several Scrum teams working on a single product. And there's the Nexus guide and you can read techniques there. But in your experience, for any of you, what might that look like? And especially in terms of constraint, does everybody have to go to a sprint review where there are several teams who are participating? And what do you do at a sprint review when everybody wants to go and you know that those people don't have really the bandwidth to be there? How do you help those people elect to understand whether this is valuable for them or not? And I guess the answer is just ask them, but what else would you be suggesting? How about you, Tony?
Cheers, thanks for calling me. This reminds me back days when I was in Microsoft and we need to constantly make the product ready to get a feedback. And it's almost impossible to have everyone testing Microsoft Teams back then or these collaboration software at the same time. But we try to have this bug bash, dogfooding sessions, to really use the tool like day-to-day life and have a conversation. So we did that. Those who can make it in a session, there's a feedback session, there's these channels to go for feedback. And we also have ongoing sessions for the period of next spring that there will be those key members who come on to continue providing feedback to make still possible to collecting feedback when we can. And we want to try to make sure that information is transparent for kind of we call it warrant discussions, and then the PO make decisions on what need to be addressed.
Thank you.
I've got an interesting story in terms of multiple teams. This is from a healthcare company, which I was coaching a couple of years back. And we've had similar, approximately 100 people working together to develop something. And the question came that should they all attend? And the answer was, why not? I mean, this is the moment for them to actually experience their customer feedback. This is an opportunity to really get to know what they are building, it makes sense or not. The only question was, can we make it engaging? Can we make it valuable for everyone? So what we tried were a couple of techniques like science fair. And the science fair is more or less like each team is having some kind of a stations, because we were developing radiology products. So you'll have something like a team has a station, another team has another station, and so on. And they are ready to actually, show the demonstration of their increment. And the customers and stakeholders are actually doing something like a gallery walk. So it's more like a science fair, and it is very engaging, very helpful. The one team can also, some of the members can visit other teams. So in that way, we found very much value, Trish.
Sorry, I was slow getting to my unmute button. So I love World Cafe. Those different techniques that you've suggested. One of the questions that is there is how early, how much time do you use in your experience for preparing for sprint reviews? Right, you've showed templates, Ravi. There's all this. Let's get these things going. How much time do you actually start in advance preparing for a sprint review and in general this information? Because the question is, who maintains this information, how much, those kind of things. Could you talk about the preparation and those kind of things, Ravi?
Yeah, I think one of the suggestions that I would make, and this also ties to your Nexus question, is have the script, even in sprint planning, plan out the story. And storytelling is important. Imagine you have a nexus of 7 teams or 9 teams. When I have tried Scrum in a scaled context, people thought that the intent of the sprint review is for every single Scrum team to show the bits and bytes that are now flowing through the wire that weren't flowing before they did their work. And we have to tell them, no, this is not an opportunity for you to show the work you did. This is an opportunity to showcase the story. So in the sprint, ideally, even in the sprint planning or even in backlog refinement, create the story, the journey of a human being, which is getting stuck at some point right now. And what is your vision about how their journey will be different? So in terms of preparation, start perhaps even in backlog refinement or sprint planning. What will be true at sprint review that is not true right now? So create the arc of the story. So that's preparation number one. And I would say if you are using systems of truth, which are automatically getting updated as you're doing your work, creating your roadmap in preparation for sprint review or updating your roadmap should not require any special work, because as you're working in Jira or Azure DevOps, the roadmap is getting updated through backlog refinement or sprint planning or the work you're doing, right? If you are using evidence-based management scoreboards that are plugged into your systems of truth, ideally there's no special preparation to be done before sprint planning. Sprint review. So most of my clients, when they use this template, they may have like a prep meeting, maybe 30 to 60 minutes before. But the goal is integrate this in as a habit in your work. It's like brushing your teeth. You don't brush your teeth for, if you don't brush your teeth for 15 days and then you're going to a party, you can't do 15 days of brushing your teeth before the party. It's not going to work, right? So building these habits as you do your work, so you should be able to go to sprint review without any prep work. I think that's the guiding principle that I would recommend.
Thank you. We have time for a couple more questions. So we've talked about setting up for sprint review, the storytelling, the purpose of a sprint review. And one of the things that I think we haven't captured is really the feedback. How do we deal with that? How do we deal with understanding what feedback is valuable or not, and that it's not just based off of what we call a highly paid person's opinion, the hippo, and a lot of that again is going to be around EBM. But how do you deal with the feedback that comes in? How do you deal with the feedback when one, understanding someone's opinion is valid or not, and two, also the other side of that where someone is just saying, I don't really care what's going on, just my feedback is you need to do this faster and cheaper. Nagesh, I would love to hear your point of view on this, because I know Ravi's, and it's something that I'm sure he's going to have something to chime in back.
Sure, sure. So how do you deal with the feedback, and especially when you have lots of feedback and you are not sure whether what's valuable, what's not valuable? I've used certain techniques in order to really deal with such kind of situations. Since this webinar is also about facilitation techniques, so I'm going to definitely talk about that. So one, we do not really funnel out any feedback in the beginning. So we have a technique called max specs in liberating structure. So everything is valid and everything is valuable, and this is like a funnel, and then there are certain things which will get stuck into the funnel, and only certain things get filtered, which is more like the min specs. That means that what is absolutely important for us in the near term, in the midterm, and in the future. And then we would see that what is our 15% solution. That means definitely one or two things which are must do's for us, which doesn't require a lot of negotiation or influence from other stakeholders in order to order the product backlog. So those are certain techniques which I would design together, and I have done it in the past, which has really helped us identify what's valuable versus what's less valuable. I would not say not valuable, because everything is valuable coming from the stakeholders.
Yeah, and what I would add is this is why we have the Designed Alliance. And I think as a result of this conversation, I realized there's a bug or opportunity for improvement. I think here, maybe I should add one item, be gut centric or opinion centric. So avoid being opinion centric and be empirical centric or experimental centric. So if someone says, I have an opinion, my intuition is telling me that this is good for our customers, tied back to the customer, tied back to the product goal. What's your hypothesis? Can we work with you offline to design an experiment, a short controlled experiment to validate and figure out what is the smallest amount of time or money that we can spend to come back with validated learning? And maybe it's a usability testing, maybe it's a survey. So as opposed to, no, that's a horrible idea, or yes, let's do it, perhaps there's a third way. What might be the shortest, least expensive experiment that we might conduct to test your hypothesis and come back with validated learning? That could be a third way, perhaps.
Yeah. There's and this kind of is in relation to another question that comes through, which is, a lot of times in organization, there's really this focus and this respect and celebration for firefighting, saving money, and all these things. And in general, when we're talking about ideas, we don't know if they're really good or bad. Everything is an idea, right? Just like Ravi was saying, Kurt Bittner said, it's something that for me, I really truly, until we see the evidence that says otherwise, that's information of what it can do. And so a facilitation technique that you can use when you're trying to, one, explore a culture of just being more open about how we're going to work together and the things that we might explore is you can create an alliance, you can create a working agreement of things that we care about. But prior to that, what's helpful is something from design thinking that's called Let's Create a Disaster. There's a liberating structure form of it, but you just ask everybody, what could make this go really, really bad? What could kill this? What do we not want? And then from there, take that information and just say, okay, so what are we going to do to pursue this? That changes potentially the notion of, just focusing on being reactive to something that we can do to be proactive. So those are some different techniques that you can explore. All right, so we have a lot of questions saved up. We'll be looking to get to those in the future. How can people stay in touch? Ravi, Tony, Nagesh, what kind of things should they be doing to really try to make their next sprint review more successful? What is some suggestions that each of you might have for them? We'll start with Tony again.
Thanks, Trish. So I think something I would love to share is the empiricism, empirical data, evidence. It may be really helpful to dive in what are the evidence the team can bring to a sprint review. Whenever there's conversation, assume good intent, what are the hypotheses? How can we work together to gather data, to gather measurements? Always use that data, whether it's to help backing up the conversation. So that's something I see very effective. So when a discussion with a sprint review to help honing on what can we do together, what is our hypothesis, how can we experiment, how can we validate.
Yep. Awesome.
Nagesh?
So I think that's me then. So I love something from Michelangelo, and first time I heard it from Ravi, and I became a fan of that. I saw the angel in the marble and carved until I set him free. So I would like to say that, first of all, visualize that future. Write a postcard from the future to yourself that imagine that you've got an most successful effective sprint review, which has just happened. What is your stakeholders talking about? Why this has become so successful? What all things they are actually writing to you? And then those things are your levers, inputs, and potential opportunities of improvement, which you can take one step at a time. So it might sound a little philosophical, but it might work. Unless and until you try it, you do not know whether it will work or not. So I am going to challenge you and recommend you and invite you to at least write a postcard from future to yourself.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, I will borrow that. Display that postcard as the first slide in the sprint review. We are natural born storytellers and story listeners. It will probably surprise your audience. Show the postcard. This is the best sprint review. Imagine this is the best sprint review we had. And here's how, as a result of the sprint review, we created the most amazing version of our product thanks to your feedback. That's what we're going to aim for today. And here are the guardrails. There are some rules for us to play nice and get this postcard. Here's how we're going to play. What do you need? What do you need from us? What can we expect from you? All right, let's dive in. Go create your alliance. Set an inspiring goal. Go create your alliance and redesign your alliance when it gets bumpy, because it'll get bumpy.
Thank you, Ravi Verma. He is one of the most compassionate people I know. So one thing I can leave is one of the things that is really just in the way that we have Scrum values. We have facilitation principles, and those have values behind them. And one of the ones that I mentioned was the core principle was participation. That participation must start with self. So if you are not participating, just like in Scrum, if we're not committed, the rest of the stuff doesn't really matter. So start with that, think about those things. And if you're not there and the other people aren't there, that's when facilitation becomes powerful in terms of what do we need to do differently? What conversations should we have to encourage that participation and for us to be purposeful? So lots of different resources. I sent that link out. It was something like Scrum.org/facilitation. Again, there's facilitation techniques that are there for every Scrum event. And I hope this was really helpful for everyone. This template is awesome that you'll be able to see when you come back. It'll be up online, and that maybe you can use some of these tips for yourself. So thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ramon.
Thank you.